Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos and I've been pondering again about what would happen to musical theatre if there was just one small spelling error in a programme or a publicity poster. Well, we might get a musical called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Crying. Or, as it might also be known, 9 to 5. Well, although musical theatre is a great part of my life and obviously a major part of what I'm interested in, I also do have other interests. Yes, it's hard to believe sometimes that unlike that famous samba, we're not just one note. And one of my many interests are classic detective stories. Stories from the golden age of British detective fiction. Particularly the works of Dorothy L. Sayers, although I'm also a great fan of Marjorie Allingham, Agatha Christie of course, and even some of the lesser-known but brilliant writers such as John Bude, Anthony Berkeley, and Edith Lorac. And the interesting thing for me is that every now and then when I'm reading a 1930s detective novel, sometimes there's a significant role for musical theatre. And may I direct you to the works of Alan Melville, if you're interested in that, because he worked in musical theatre, but also wrote detective stories which often featured stories and themes from musical theatre. And there might even be an episode of Musical Talk in reviewing musical theatre detective fiction books from the 1930s. And I know if our old friend Don McChesney is listening in, he'll be the first in line to join me for that, I think. But actually, when you think about it, there aren't that many musicals, certainly famous successful musicals, which revolve around a traditional whodunit plot. And there is a reason for that, I think, which is actually that there are certain things in the structure of a whodunit, whether it be on stage or in a novel, which probably militate against their being successfully turned into a musical. Now, of course, there are a few examples of great successes in this field, Curtains by Kander and Ebb being one, and The Mystery of Edwin Drood being another. But there aren't that many more, and if there are, I've not heard of them, and I think we'll have to wait a very long time until we get the musicalised version of Murder on the Orient Express, or Singing in the Train, as it might be known. But at last year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe, there was a terribly successful musical detective story. And it was called There's No Mystery in Murder, a new Yorkshire musical. And just for good measure, there's an exclamation mark after murder as well, which is one of my favourite things in musical theatre advertising and titling. But the show was brilliant. Written and directed by William Lambert, produced by Alexis Rose, and with music, both songs and lyrics, by Danny Horn, and musical direction and orchestrations by Max Runham, the show turned out to be an absolutely delightful little gem, because it worked as a detective story and it worked as a musical. The names of the people I've just mentioned come from a company called Northern Corner, and their show garnered hundreds of 4- and 5-star reviews, including from us here on Musical Talk. I called it a very funny, well-constructed musical, and so it was. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because, having seen the show and loving it, I sat down with Will and Alexis to talk about There's No Mystery in Murder. So in just a minute, we'll be able to hear about this musical. And to give you some idea of its plot, here's the blurb. Murder has come to Rothersdale, where nothing ever happens. A local councillor is found dead after his plan to build a big supermarket creates unrest. A jaded city detective with an unblemished record for solving crime and an enthusiastic local cop desperate to prove herself must unwillingly team up to crack the case. Will they stop the murderer before they strike again? And that, I think, gives you a sense of what the plot is and its location. But to really hammer home the location, which is often a very important part of any well-written detective story, let's hear an introductory number to the show called Welcome to Rothersdale. And then we'll hear that conversation with Will Lambert and Alexis Rose about There's No Mystery in Murder.
Welcome to the town of Rothersdale. Hidden in a valley of the bosom of the hill lies a simple northern town with some trouble at the mill. a place that's unaccustomed to the up-and-coming thrill.
There's been whispers in the bakery, some stories at the bar. Something quite unsavoury, quite chilling, quite bizarre.
In a town where nothing happens, nothing special or obtuse. Well, it only seems they've got a chuffing killer on the loose.
Rotherdail, Rotherdail, a town the world forgot. There's not a lot of places quite as dull as Rotherdail. Rotherdail.
We don't welcome outsiders, and besides, no one would ever come to
Rotherdail, Rotherdail.
Rotherdail is where I was grown. It's all I've wanted, all I've known. How could anyone hope to find a place on earth as sweet and kind as
Rotherdail, Rotherdail. We've never had a vandal nor a scandal in these parts.
There's nought that we can't handle. We are bland, but we are smart.
But it seems the times are changing for this rural little gang.
They were screaming at the village hall, but no one heard the bang.
Rotherdail, Rotherdail. Finally, this quiet town
There's something dirty going down.
Rotherdail, Rotherdail.
Maybe something's happened.
That'll put this shithole on the map.
Rotherdail,
Yorkshire,
Rotherdail.
Yorkshire.
What we got is all we need.
We've never ventured south of Leeds.
We walk our dogs upon the moor.
We've never had to lock our doors.
A pint of best.
A cup of tea.
And toxic masculinity. Rotherdail, 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 Rotherdail.
Hello, my name is William Lambert. I am the writer, director, and I guess I act in it as well, of a show called There's No Mystery in Murder.
I'm Alexis Rose. I'm the other half of Northern Corner, production company for There's No Mystery in Murder, and I'm producing the show.
So we have the producer, the writer, and the director, and yet two mouths, which means somebody at least is doubling up. So let's talk a little bit about this show. Before we get into anything else, how would you describe it, without giving any of the salient beats away? You know, just the general blurb.
Well, actually, you're better at blurbs than me.
I will do-
I'm good at sort of writing the
That's true.
scripts, but
I
then
will do the
blurbs,
blurb.
sort of quick things are like, oh no, I need you to help me condense it down.
You're not a boiler downer.
No, I'm not a boiler downer.
No, I edit his scripts.
You're a builder.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a builder up.
Yeah, I write them and then she sort of
I edit them.
crafts them. Yeah.
So, There's No Mystery in Murder. I would describe it as a comedy whodunit with songs. It's a bit like Midsummer Murders meets Poirot with music. It's set in a small northern town, a fictional town called Rotherdail, where nothing ever happens, and the first crime has happened for at least 35 years, and the police have no idea what to do about it.
Now, I think the telling thing here is it's a whodunit, essentially,
It
isn't it?
is
Yes.
a whodunit.
Now, something I'm interested in here is, we might as well get straight into the mechanics of the narrative and the plot, because, as you say, it's a play with music.
Yes.
And therefore songs are in a show to do something, usually.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm very interested here, when you've got a whodunit, you've got a particular narrative arc.
Yeah.
It doesn't follow drama in quite the same way, because we all know that a whodunit builds up to a particular denouement, normally.
Yeah.
Does that affect the song placement? I'd like to talk about the narrative in a minute, but just the songs really interest me in a whodunit. Because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to work out where and what the job of those songs is going to be and where you need to place them.
Yeah.
Well, one of the original ideas for this was just to make it just sort of a play, actually. But then when I was watching murder mysteries on TV,
You mean the antiques programs weren't available?
oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when I was watching them, there was a lot of when they were just sort of describing when they were figuring it out, when the detectives were like sort of doing it, they would just think about it a lot, and then they would just be like, "Oh, it was this." And I always thought there was something missing. There was the internal cogs turning that you didn't see, and I was like, "Oh, well, that's perfect for musical theatre." And so I was like, "Okay, well, if I want a song to do the revelation at the end, then I've got to make it all a musical." And that was the first thing. It was going to be a play, and then I was like, well, if I want a song at the end, we need to include some more songs. So it'd be very strange if it was all play and then one amazing song at the end.
Now, did you say more songs or Morse songs? Because that would be very
Well, there's always a pun going on somewhere.
And I think what's really interesting is how we then added in the songs at the beginning to introduce the characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a scene-setting Rothersdale song.
Yes. So we have a big scene-setting "Welcome to Rothersdale," which is the big opening song, and then you have Banks's song, which introduces her and kind of tells her backstory and tells the audience about who she is. You know, the enthusiastic policewoman who is just desperate to solve a crime and nothing happens, and we have this really lovely, sweet introductory song for her. And then you have Hilch's song, which is the catchy title song, There's No Mystery in Murder.
Now, that character, of course, is the detective who's been called in from the big town of Leeds.
The big town of Leeds. Very
famous
exciting.
town of Leeds.
I'm using that phraseology because that is essentially how it comes across, isn't it? Someone's come in from the big glittery city.
Someone's come in from Leeds.
Leeds, that's very exciting.
Wow, yeah.
I like Leeds. It's got a great cemetery.
Oh, it's lovely, yeah.
It really has. I love it. It's one of my favourite cemeteries in the country, believe it or not.
Wow,
Yeah, so in a way then, you've got you're quite right. Once you've decided that a song is useful, I really like the idea, by the way, of it being the externalisation of an introspective thing. And actually that is a genuinely clever thing to do in relation to a whodunit. You're correct that quite often the detective, he or she, will magic up the solution.
Yes.
And then we marvel at their brilliance. But actually, a little bit more in the procedural. Now, this is more of a procedural, isn't it? Rather than the sort of the inspired Sherlock Holmesian type. Mm-hmm. Well, once you've got that idea of a song, you've got to have other songs, so you have your opening number. And yes, once again, it's a character setting. You've got your character explanation for your Leeds detective, actually. I mean, that really lays out who he is.
Yes.
I mean, it's hinted at, and you see a bit in the interaction, but actually the song brings across, if you like, the arrogance, actually.
Yes.
Much more than the interaction. You know, that comes across as merely mean or nasty or hard-edged, however you want to describe that. But I really like the fact that actually that gave us, once again, a window into the character. So you are using the songs in this way. There are a couple of other songs in it.
The Confrontation,
yes. So Danny Horner, who wrote the music, so he created one tune for Banks, and then he created one tune for Hilch, and then in the Confrontation song, where they sort of go at each other, he sort of beautifully layered those two tunes on top of one another. So you have Banks's song and Hilch's song going on at the same time, but sort of working very well, and they're sort of, having an argument throughout the song, which works, I think, well.
And there's a little bit of Les Mis.
Oh yeah, there's a big so me and Danny, who wrote the music, so one of our first shows we were in together many years ago, when we were about 16 years old, was Les Mis, and we've always sort of sung the Confrontation to one another. So when it got to the point where we were like, okay, we're going to write a musical, well, we have to have a confrontation in there.
Well, it's also human drama, though, isn't it? I mean, Confrontation is just drama.
Yes, exactly.
Large.
Exactly.
I love the fact that I do like that idea of the two different melodies being able to overplay each other.
Yeah.
Irving Berlin used to do that all the time. In fact, it was one of his particular characteristics. He'd have this, one character sing this and one character sing that, and then they combine at the end, either for dramatic purposes or romantic purposes, of course, because it works in that context as well.
And Hilch's theme, I think, when Banks is singing, it's always very light and pretty and quite rapid. Hilch's is much slower, and there's a lot more kind of, you can almost hear the bass twanging in it, and so when I won't do a spoiler. I almost did.
When something
happens, you hear Hilch's song. So yes, you have that kind of theming going on. Of course, Max Runham, who did the orchestrations for us, he's incredible. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He was actually born with one arm, and he plays so many instruments. It's absolutely outstanding.
Ridiculous
he's
to
so
watch him.
talented.
Like, he plays piano just unbelievable.
He's incredible. And he has just done the most beautiful backing tracks for us. We're so fortunate.
Well, it comes across. I mean, there's oomph to them as well, which is nice. So we've spoken a bit about the songs, but I'd like to talk about the narrative into which they fit, first of all. And I think, Will, that's particularly you. But obviously, as a producer, presumably, do you have a dramaturgical role in this as well? Do you sort of help develop, by which I mean, the fresh pair of eyes that can come in and has the authority as producer or director, but that's you, obviously, Will, so it's hard of you to do it. We need to sharpen that up.
We do work as a team.
Definitely.
So, I mean, we are cheesy alert, but we are a couple in real life. So we do work very closely together. So while Will will script it and he'll write sections of the script, and then I will come along and go, well, that doesn't work because you said this earlier, and hang on a minute, we haven't explained that, and I'll do all of that sort of thing. And then when we were kind of putting it on its feet, we did that together and kind of added stuff in. And of course, we've both done musical theatre for years, so we're able to bring a lot of kind of knowledge and expertise of being on stage ourselves.
One of absorbs it
through
rather.
that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So to really, what's really important about whodunit is it has to make sense. You can't leave the audience going, well, hang on.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Loophole.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was really important when we were developing the script to keep making sure that, okay, well, but why did she go to the pub? And just trying to make sense of everything.
And that was actually one of the hardest things, like in terms of like what was the hardest thing to do. It was actually writing, so when we were like thinking we come to the Fringe, it's like, well, it's got to be an hour. And I think writing a murder mystery in an hour is quite a tricky thing because you have to introduce the cops, and then you have to introduce enough characters who it could have been.
Yeah.
And I was like,
palette of suspects.
Yes, exactly. And when I was writing it, I was like, oh, this character will be good. Oh, this will be a funny scene. This will be a funny scene. And then I sort of and I was like, oh, let's see how many pages we're at. I was like, okay, that's basically it. That's all we're allowed. I was like, got to wrap it up. And then, but it was quite nice actually having, limiting, coming up to the Fringe and limiting yourself to an hour, because it meant you got to make a lot happen on each scene. And then I thought, well, that'd be quite good actually, because then it means each scene will be quite punchy and quite fun and quite fast, and it will feel like an hour-long show, but hopefully it feels shorter, because you're just sort of...
Oh, it didn't drag, I can tell you.
Good,
There's a very
good.
definitive beginning, middle and end, and we needed that structure. And the other thing that was really important to us, and I remember very clearly, we had this conversation coming home, we'd just been to see The Mousetrap.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
do you remember this? And we were walking home.
That's a new show, isn't it?
Yeah. Not many people have seen it. Yeah. No.
I think that'll be a hit.
But I hear good
Catch
things.
it while it's still on.
Yes.
But we walked home from that show and we were talking about our show, and the thing that was really stood out was when you come out of a really good whodunit, you either have two feelings. You either think, I cracked it, I'm super clever, and you feel really smug and good about yourself, and you want to kind of tell people like, oh, it was really hard, but I cracked it. Yeah. Or you don't get it, and then you're like, God, that was good, because I didn't get it.
They bamboozled me.
Exactly. And we kind of just really wanted to capture that of actually coming out of a show and having a reaction to it in that way, and feeling something in yourself about how you experienced it.
Oh, sorry, and I was just going to say, follow up with that. There's just another level of engagement with a murder mystery, which is quite just fun and as well for an audience. You're not just watching people do something; you're constantly like paying attention, just a little bit more to like what people are doing, little movements, things that people are doing, and then you're trying to piece it together. And it's quite because I was speaking to people after the preview. They were like, "Oh, I was watching the way you did that," and I was thinking, "Oh, does that mean that?" Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. You don't know.
But the other interesting thing I think about detective mysteries is that they are very often, exactly as you say, both in novel form and on television, about here's the problem, let us solve it, and can you do it quicker than the detective? But there's not often room for other kinds of relationships. It's all about relationships, and it's quite often about antagonistic relationships, as this piece is, but there's not often a love relationship, or sometimes there is, but it's a little bit sort of crowbarred in. I actually rather like the fact that this, like many other detective stories, sort of actually avoids that, because there's plenty there. If that's what you're here for in Edinburgh, there's plenty to satisfy that particular itch. Yeah. I do like the recognition that there's a lot of relationships in life which are non-romantic, and actually detective novels I think reflect that a great deal more. And for those of us who are sort of low-level cynical ratbags, that appeals more to our sensibilities. Do you both like detective fiction in book form or television form or film? You obviously go and see it at the stage, but did you have a love of it enough in the past to make this comfortable, or were you coming to it fresh?
No, I love it. Yeah. I've just been reading Richard Osman's stuff. It's incredible. The Thursday Murder Club, highly recommend.
I'm more Dorothy L. Sayers. She hasn't written much recently.
But I think the ability to take comedy, which is something that is close to both of our hearts. We've both loved doing comedy. We've both played comic roles in the past, and apply it to the murder mystery genre. I think that just felt like the absolute right spot for us to bring something to Fringe. I think there is a lot of serious stuff at Fringe, and there's you can absolutely delve into the innermost psyche of humanity. But actually, we just wanted to have something we could just have a really good time and really enjoy it.
Yes. Well, I think I can tell you now you've succeeded in that. I mean, it's a very engaging piece, and that is the great success. Accessible, and not everyone likes that form of detective stories. They don't, but I'd recommend this to anyone. I think it's great fun. So. And is that the same for you, Will? That you like detective fiction in other forms?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I'm more film it's TV. Like, you know, I sort of grew
There's
up
other
watching.
formats, yes.
Yeah, you know, I always remember, you know, growing up watching Jonathan Creek. That was one of the first ones that really engaged me, because he was not just. It was a detective thing, but he was also a weird character. He wasn't just like a cool detective. He was kind of quirky and strange, and also very, very funny. But then there was always an amazing twist to it that was always like super engaging. I remember just watching that as a kid, being like, oh wow, these are so clever, you know. And then so when it came to sort of writing something on my own, it was like, let's give it a go. Let's see how it goes.
So let's actually roll back then to the very beginning. How did this piece come to be? When did you decide that you wanted to bring something up to the Fringe, and did you always know it was going to be a detective piece?
Well, so, when did I want to take something up? I probably wanted to take something up when I first came to Fringe, when I was probably like 14 years old. I remember coming up for the first time and just being like, this is incredible. And I saw some super silly, like, one of the reasons this show is so fun and it's kind of silly is because I saw a show back then, I think it was called Big Day Out, and it was just like, I just remember laughing like I'd never sort of laughed before, and I was like, what a time Edinburgh Fringe is. And then for one reason or another, and I was more doing sort of video stuff, and I was sort of writing short films that were like 10 pages long, basically. And then I was like, I've still not scratched that itch of going to Edinburgh. And then so 2019 sort of rolled along, and I was like, okay, right, I got to write something longer than 10 pages, and I want to take something to Edinburgh. So I got to write something that's, let's say, half an hour, an hour long. And so it was like, okay, what is that going to be? And then I'm from a small town. So I was like, well, I'll write it about that, because that sort of makes sense.
Write what you know.
You write what you know, exactly. and also, and then I was like, well, murder mystery is very engaging, and I think we'd probably either been to see, or we were thinking about going to see Mousetrap, and then I was like,
rather than actually committing a murder. So.
Well, you know, it was write a script or actually do it for real.
The method, darling, the method.
I thought this might be a bit easier. And then so yeah, it went from there really. And then I thought a murder mystery gives me a great structure to work off, and also allows you to layer in all the silly characters and fun characters that I kind of wanted to include in there.
Yeah, because I think when you write for film, you love your silly characters, don't you? Like that's one of your strongest points.
Yeah, and when
silly characters.
Yeah, and I sort of started. You know, when you're younger, you know, you start off just acting, right? So, and when I was acting, I always wanted to be someone different. Whereas someone might, you know, some actors, they like playing themselves, but in different scenes. Whereas I always liked being different in everything.
You're a character actor.
A character actor, yeah.
Rather than that.
Yes, and exactly. And then so when that was like looped to go to the writing thing, I was like, okay, well, how do we make all these different characters within the same world? And I think saying it in this small northern town was like, just make a mad little town of funny, weird things.
Yeah, it just made sense. I mean, I always end up getting cast in the character acts. Like I'm Roz in 9 to 5. I'm Patty in Greece.
I know, yes.
Those are the roles that I play, and so it just makes a lot of sense. And I think once we kind of sat down,
it was called the soubrette a few years ago.
That's a lovely term.
The ingenue and the soubrette. The ingenue, if you like, was the lead female character, and the soubrette was quite often the comedy couple, or one of the comedy couple who turned up later on.
I mean, that's basically us. That's basically us. And I think
it's an honourable tradition, by the way.
Yeah. And I love it. I mean, Roz in 9 to 5 is one of my favourite roles of all time.
There you are.
So there you go. But I think once it all kind of sort of came together and made sense. And this was pre-pandemic, so we were kind of, once we sort of made a decision, like, actually we're going to do this and this is what we're going to do. And then we realised that, I've produced before. I've produced in London, but I've never produced for Fringe. So that was that learning curve. That was a huge learning curve of kind of like, right, well, how do we get a venue? How do we do it?
Competition for resources, oddly, is greater in Edinburgh than it would be in London.
I mean, it's completely different kettle of fish. It's been a fantastic journey, even though it was massively disrupted by the pandemic. Because we were ready to go.
We were ready to go for 2020.
We all.
And we actually cast Nia and Katie in, I think it was like February or something like that of 2020.
They were already cast. We kept them.
We kept them.
Well done.
And then obviously March rolled around and changed everything. We were already on sale for Brighton Fringe. Yes, so we were going to take it to Brighton as well. And everything had to stop. So. But actually, it gave us a chance to refine it a bit more as well. So we carried on sort of refining it and, working on it.
Well, time is helpful. I mean, COVID was terrible so many ways, but it did allow developmental time for an awful lot of things.
Yes.
Well, you wrote a full-length feature film during COVID.
Well, it was quite nice, actually. So that was
didn't
already...
film it, I rather guess.
No, sadly not.
No.
entered into a competition and did okay in that, so that was fine.
I did okay. He was a quarter-finalist in the big break, so
that's
it's pretty okay.
But yeah, it allowed, gave Danny some time to sort of really hone the songs as well, which was always useful.
So let's get back to the songs a bit, because obviously they are an integral part of any. Well, you've said how much this came about, or the songs came about, because they had a real practical purpose in illustrating the inner life and the thoughts. But you don't write music yourself, I think, or certainly not. You went somewhere else for songs. How does that relationship work?
Yeah, so me and Danny have been friends for years. Like I think we've been friends since we were 13 years old, and we've always enjoyed musical theatre. But Danny was always the singer-songwriter. So at 16 years old, he was always writing his own songs and going to pubs and performing them there. And he's gone on to continue to do that, so he's sort of had some albums made, and he also was Ray in A Sunny Afternoon on the West End, which made him a lot better guitarist, because playing every single day will do that.
It's quite a big role, I'd have thought.
It's quite a big role, yes,
what
quite
with him
demanding.
being the central character.
Yeah, quite demanding. And then when that was sort of, so he was on there for about a year and a bit, I think. And then when that was sort of coming to the end, I was like, I'm going to think about doing a musical. And he was like, you know what, I'll do the songs for you. And I was like, perfect, that makes it easy. Because I was like, I want it to be a musical. And then I was like, God, who am I going to get to do that? I was like, and I was like, am I just making this harder than maybe it needs to be? But then when Danny was like, I'll do it, I was like, perfect, great. Yeah. And so the way it worked was like, I sort of in the script was like, a song should probably go here, a song should probably go here, and I would sort of give Danny like I would write down like a list of, or a summary of like what should happen and what information needs to be laid out within the song, and then he would just sort of go to town on it. And he's someone he's very we have a good working relationship, and he sort of he'll ask me questions like, what if this is involved, and he'll sort of push the barriers and make the song even better. And he'll include some of his own ideas, and I'll be like, that's a great idea, and I can use that later on as well.
So the personality of the songwriter is involved in this. It's more than just.
He's more than just someone who writes the music.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he sort of takes it and builds on it and makes it even better than it ever was. It's not just taking my words and just sort of playing G, A, C, or whatever.
His particular talent is the fast lyric, as you'll have heard last night.
A patter song.
The patter song.
Yes.
And his talent for rhyme and finding the...
Yes.
I mean, it's just amazing. And, particularly in the final song, which we had a really clear vision for. Like, in Sherlock when... Like, if it had been in film, there would have been things appearing everywhere.
Visualising.
Exactly.
Yes. Whereas this has got to be... I mean, we do get visualisation in this, but it's actually led by the song, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's the framework of the visualisation. That's quite interesting, actually, I think. Sorry, just saying that.
Yeah.
Using a song as a structure. I mean, you'd explain that, actually, obviously, because it's the denouement song, essentially. But it's a framework, a musical framework, onto which you can then hook some visuals and explain. It does a lot, doesn't it?
It does, because it takes us into her mind. So, and there's a completely different lighting state used for that song, which is never used throughout the rest of the show. And it really takes us into her thinking. It snaps us out of the reality, because the whole of the rest of the show is real time, basically. And it takes us into her mind, and she's rummaging back through her memories, and that's why you see the actors rewinding, appearing, reappearing, popping in, popping out, as she works her way through her memories, desperately searching for what did she miss.
It's a filtering process for her as well, isn't it? She's taking out the bits from each conversation that she needs to pick out in order to try to identify who the culprit or culprits are.
Indeed. And we built it into the backing track as well. So there's not only the visuals on stage, but there's tiny audio cues going on as well. So we recorded the actors saying some key lines and built that into the backtrack, so that the audience gets as kind of full experience as possible.
Soundscape.
Yes. As she works her way through her memories.
And a soundscape is more than a song in a way, isn't it? I mean, or rather, it's a song doing some pretty heavy theatrical lifting.
Yes. Yeah.
And people often forget songs have that ability. People sometimes think, line, lovely, lovely song. And it may or may not be plot relevant, and it may or may not push the plot forward. But sometimes, actually, it's not used dramatically as well as narratively. So I'm really pleased to hear that.
And I think it was also important for us not to waste time with songs. So we didn't put anything in which is filler.
No.
There's no massive dance number. There's no kind of, because it doesn't need to be. So, you know.
So you have a cast of 4 or 5?
There is a cast of 4, yeah.
So massive is a you're pushing at that
It
envelope.
would push it. It would push it, exactly.
Oh, there were two fake legs, so I suppose you could.
You
could have a very small Tiller Girls line.
Just through the wings.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't put anything in that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Which is actually why Maureen's song is so short, because.
But it's the better for it. That's the emotional song. Well,
yeah.
it's not the emotional song, but it's a song that has a great emotional punch.
Yes.
And it is all the sweeter, I think, as a song in its own right, but for us as the audience. And actually, it does what it needs to do very quickly and then comes over very quickly. And you think, oh, fine. It also signifies, in this case, it's signifying her love for somebody.
Yes.
It signifies how simple that love is for somebody, rather than a complex love. I mean, actually, I thought it was very nice, because actually her love is quite... It's devotedly simple, rather than being devotedly complex. And there are complex relationships in this world. I've seen them on television. So.
And I quite liked having that song in there, because with a song like that, you're kind of expecting there to be maybe a gag at the end or something like that, and sort of leading you up the corridor, and then it was quite nice. I think it was quite nice to have something that was, most of it is quite fun and silly, but then it was quite nice to sort of have a bit more of a heart to it, because then audiences can be like, oh, actually, there's something else going underneath this as well. It's not just
silliness.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Well, it's relationships, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
we haven't actually spoken about the central relationship, which, as we said, is for 2 detectives and their antagonism, but also, it's been done before.
Fair few times.
When these detectives get together, it was Moida, which you're both too young to understand, but it was the opening credits of Heart to Heart.
Oh, okay.
Well, as it happens, they were a married couple, but they were very different.
Right.
Obviously, these two are not a married couple, but it's... But it is an emotional relationship, and you can sort of see thawing. The characters have whatever journeys they have, but you can see steps towards each other, antagonistic steps away from each other as crises develop. It's it feels true in that sense, as far as any relationship of some time displayed in an hour can, if you get my drift.
Yeah, because Banks, she's so desperate to solve a crime and to, proceed in her career, and she's so excited by what's happening, again, without giving too much away. But and then you can see that this guy comes in and she's like, oh, I'm going to get to work with this guy. I'm going to, I've never had that chance before. I'm going to learn from him. It's going to be great. And he's just totally disinterested. And to the point of just, he keeps telling her to shut up and, go away and worse.
Yes.
And you almost feel her kind of like heartbreak at but I thought you were going to teach me.
Yes.
And I thought you were going to give me that opportunity. And he doesn't.
But more than that, she calls him out.
She does.
Quite rightly so as well.
She does call him out. She does call him out, which is super interesting, because I think she kind of starts off hopeful and then very quickly realises she's fighting a losing battle, and then starts to call him on his behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he's got feet of clay, doesn't he? I mean, he is obviously good, but he allowed himself to get jaded.
Yes. Yeah. And she actually says that. There's that brilliant little lyric in there where she says, he says, I've been at this job for a bloody long time, and she says, I think we can see you're in your decline.
Yes. So let's go back to the song again then. Forgive me, you said you obviously sketch it out sort of in what the song needs to do structurally and narratively.
Yes.
Did you ever plop a lyric in and say, by the way, I think this is, how much did you contribute to the songs? Were you able to contribute to the songs?
Yes, yeah. So Danny sort of will write down the songs, and he'll have, put some lovely things in there, and then occasionally it'll be like, maybe even later on in the writing process, I'll be like, oh, actually, this bit of information needs to be in there, this bit of information needs to be in there. And he'll either do it, or actually that line that we've just said there, I think we can see you're in your decline, that was one of our own.
It was.
We can claim that as our own. So it was something else.
I wasn't going to say that. But
Yes,
It's come out somehow.
Yeah.
Sorry, Danny.
Yeah, sorry, Danny.
No, but it's a collaborative. Songs are collaborative, or good songs are often
Yeah.
collaborative. It's not simply one person in their temple writing their thing, one
Yeah.
person
No.
in their other garret writing theirs, one
Yeah.
person in a secluded room writing something else,
Yeah.
and then it comes magically together.
Yeah.
It's got to, because presumably the songs will have also brought things which made you need to make some changes to the narrative and the lines.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
It's a two-way street.
But also the actual music, so not just the lyrics, but the music, that was very sort of collaborative. So Danny sort of wrote all the words and the sort of chord structure and everything like that, and then he gave it over to Max, and Max sort of took everything and made it even better again.
He set the jelly.
And it was and so we had he sort of did a bit of it, and then I would go to his house and we would just sort of work on the songs, and I'd be like, I can't. You know, I know a little bit of guitar, and I can sort of sometimes hear it in my head. And then what's amazing about sitting with someone like Max is he's like, I can create that for you. You know, I'll be and so
have some French horn. Why not?
Yeah. And so in the hardest song, let's say, was the final song, because that was more. It doesn't follow a traditional sort of structure really. It's sort of
isn't it?
And it's like what we said before. It's a soundscape, and it was trying to find the perfect soundscape. And so that was a real journey actually, because we'd sort of start off with just like a beating drum, because that was what initially I really like songs with just a beating drum. It's like God's Gonna Cut You Down by Johnny Cash. I was like, okay, it just needs to have that sort of heart to it, and then
I was going to say, can I say in exams they do say show your workings? So. Thank you for that.
Well, you know. And then we would just sort of we just played really, and I'd just be like, well, what about if we try a bit of this? And he'd just sort of layer that on, and I'd be like, oh, no, that doesn't work anymore. And then slowly it sort of
layered,
and we layered it together, and then I'd sort of sing it, and I'd be like, nah, not quite right. And I think, you know, together we were a bit like, is this going to work? And then I don't know what it was, something clicked, and it was just suddenly like, that's it. And it was a lovely moment, because I was like, thank the Lord, this is actually going to be good.
We have achieved.
Yes, we have achieved something today. Yes.
And have the songs changed since they've been, you know, the songs go into the narrative, you start performing the narrative in read-throughs and rehearsals and things. It's relatively easy to change words on the spot, the narrative on the spot. I don't mean the story, but I mean, you know, the words. I was going to say the libretto, so let's go for it. Yeah. But actually, it's harder to. It's absolutely possible and always done, but you know, it is sort of harder to change songs to a degree, just because
we have
they're more complex,
so
aren't they?
we have. We've actually changed one of the songs since the preview. So we changed the melody slightly.
As soon as that.
Yeah.
So really, you know,
really recently.
We're four performances in.
Indeed, yes. So we've been slightly adapting to suit the actors. Because we wanted the actors to be as comfortable as possible. Yeah. You know, it's not easy. You know, they all work full time. You know, they're not professionals. We had to do a very compressed rehearsal period because Nia moved to Wales during the pandemic. So it was
that's a commute.
It was not quite the rehearsal period I had originally planned. So we had to kind of do it as kind of compressed, and what we've been able to do, thank God, due to you know, Max and Danny being flexible, is we've been able to adapt the songs for the actors. So they, you know, Max came to rehearsal, heard them sing, he's tweaked some, you know, semitone here, a semitone there, and just made it so that they are at their most comfortable, which has been really helpful, and actually something you don't normally get to do. Like, either songs in your range or it's not, you know, you don't normally get to kind of, can I just switch it up a bit?
Well, the odd advantage of this is in the electronic world we live in.
Yes,
it's quite amazing,
isn't it? Yes, because you know, a few years ago you might have to go back to the copyist.
Yes, exactly. So that's been really great, and it's you know, we've been able to kind of really bring out the best of the actor. So you know, we've not been precious about things. We've wanted to kind of give the actor the best possible chance of showcasing and feeling comfortable, because they're knocking this out every night for 21 nights.
Well, of course, because they're acting and they're singing, and they're acting and singing in songs. By which I mean the acting doesn't stop when the song starts.
Most certainly not. No,
exactly. So you're right. You want to make the singing part as easy as possible. Otherwise, it's just an extra burden. I mean, and you know, you can hear it in lovely old-fashioned recordings. I mean, I'm off on a tangent, and here I go. But if you listen to it, was quite a famous song in its time when Jack Buchanan sang "Everything Stops for Tea," which is a song you may or may not have heard of, but it sort of still lingers to this day. It was used by Tetley recently in a series of advertisements. But a very famous recording from about 1933. You know, top of the sheet music sales in Britain, so that kind of popular. Okay. But if you listen to the recording, Jack Buchanan was, you know, the pop singer of his time in a way, but there's a terrible, for whatever reason it's orchestrated in such a way that he has to jump the octave halfway through the song. He's just saying, you know, this is his legacy song, if you like, one of the songs that's lasted for him the most, and then there's this thing and you just think, that's not his fault. Somewhere along the line, the the person in charge of the orchestra and the recording on the day didn't think, well, we might just change that key a bit,
Change
shall
it,
we?
Yeah.
Anyway, there we are. That was a tangent. I'm sure you spotted. So let's talk the show. You had the idea, you've created it, you had a brief rehearsal in London.
Yes.
And then you've come straight to Edinburgh, and we're recording this quite early on in the run.
Yes.
We literally are.
Yes,
so.
we've only had 3 performances so far.
And it's the first Monday at the Fringe, isn't it?
Yes.
So.
Yes, 2 for 1 nights. We're hoping for a good. But we've been amazed. We feel so blessed because we've had really good audiences every single night so far. So long may it continue. But it's really exciting. It's really exciting for us. But I mean, genuinely, we had one preview night in London, which was a very last minute. We did it at Theatre Delhi in Leadenhall. Actually, it was the first show to be performed at Theatre Delhi in their new space. So they've recently
So
moved.
history made that night.
So we sold out the preview, so that was great.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, we do have a lot of mates in London, but it was very nice. It was very nice, and it was really helpful for us to get the audience reaction and kind of
check it works as well.
Check everything. There's a lot of props in this show.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of
legs,
handheld props and the legs. So thank goodness that Katie was coming up in her car and we didn't have to take those on the train.
Very
Goodness
fortunate,
me.
Put them in the luggage room.
But there was a lot of props, and we needed to make sure. We were doing prop runs where we were kind of like mapping up things and.
But did your preview and indeed first couple of early performances in Edinburgh, did your audience tell you anything about the show? Because I always think it's interesting to find out what you put it out there. Actually, audiences tell you things in return. That bit's funnier than you thought it was. That bit which you didn't think was funny at all is, and that thing you thought was an absolutely surefire died in a ditch.
Well, hilarious.
Which the other kind of ha.
So funny, actually. So funny you say that because audiences are strange things.
I know. I've often been in one.
Yeah. So there are sometimes. So the first 2 nights, there's one thing that happens that's like I was like and actually it happened in the preview as well. So it's happened in 3 shows, like guaranteed laugh kind of thing. And I was like, okay, fine, that's the guaranteed laugh. And then last night, no laugh. And I was like, what? Why is that? And it's interesting how. But then other things that maybe weren't getting as big a laugh suddenly do get a laugh. And so it's just a mysterious thing of like, well, is it us? Is it the audience? And it's probably just a timing thing. Some gags are just something like it's a fraction of a moment here, it's a fraction of a moment there, and that can be the difference between whether people laugh or they don't laugh. In terms of bigger things, like I think the reception from the people who came to the preview was just. It wasn't as specific as this moment doesn't work, this moment doesn't work. That was all general. Just this is good fun, good murder mystery. They guessed it. They didn't. More internally, so Danny, who wrote the music, he sort of gave some notes. Which were very, very useful.
Different kind of notes, I think you're meaning here.
Yes, exactly. Well, he's good.
I'm there always.
And that's definitely helped, and that's just like, but they're like, you got sort of, you got the sort of the big, I don't know, you describe it like a sculpture basically, and that's just sort of, chipping away, just making it even more refined and better. And I think we'll do that throughout the run as well, because it is 21 performances, right? So you kind of got it, even though it's kind of becoming muscle memory, you kind of keep it fresh each night a little bit. So occasionally we'll be like, you've been saying that line this way, why don't you try it this way?
Tweak it,
and just tweak it, just keeps it fresh and keeps it alive, hopefully every night.
And I think, and this is going to sound terribly cheesy, but to go back to kind of how we work together, one of the things that I do is I really interrogate like what he writes. So, and we had
not how Hilch does in this film, in the show though. It does it in a slightly nicer way.
No invisible beat.
But I think actually because we're a couple, like we have a bit.
It gives you license, doesn't it?
It gives me license to kind of go. Yeah. That doesn't work. Or
get out.
What about this?
Yeah. You're on the sofa tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Fix that scene, or else you're not. But I think that dynamic that we have enables that. Like, I will never tell him it's good if I don't think it's good.
No, I mean that's honest. And
yes.
That's more important.
And exactly. Because It would be obviously much worse if we came up and suddenly it was like
It's terrible.
garbage. It's like, why didn't you tell me?
Well, you can't fool the audience. I mean, at the end of the day,
exactly.
the audience are the only judge.
And exactly. They do not care how much work you've put into it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, sadly it doesn't. And hopefully, if it doesn't work, then hopefully you learn from it, and you either you keep on creating something and hope to bring something next time.
Well, it does work. Let me tell you.
Oh, good thing.
I'm perfectly satisfied in telling you that, and I'm not in a relationship with Guy. I mean, I'm delighted because it's an excellent piece of work. So let's then talk about how people can see it. And your company, because this won't be the last thing you do together, clearly. So, a little bit of who you are and how people might stay in touch on this or other future productions.
Absolutely.
Your socials, as I believe it boils down to. Give us your socials.
Yeah. So you can find Northern Corner on Twitter.
Which is the name of the company.
And you can find us on Instagram, either as Northern Corner, also as No Mystery in Murder. And you can find us on Facebook on northerncorner.net, and you can also find us on the interweb at northerncorner.net. We are on all the things. We're even on TikTok now, much to my horror.
Yes.
So we're even on TikTok as No Mystery in Murder.
Brilliant. Well, my last question to you both is, what next? Have you started bubbling up the next idea? I don't need lots of details, but I just wondered if everyone does it. They start their show in Edinburgh. They go, "Oh, I'm enjoying this. What are we going to do next year?"
He's always got 7 scripts on the go.
There's 2 ideas. So, because I think I said earlier, like I was sort of writing sort of film scripts, but actually, having done this, I've sort of almost refound my love of theatre, and I've sort of written 50 pages of this next thing, and actually my plan while I'm in Edinburgh is to spend my mornings sort of continue writing that, perform in the evening.
Good
and
luck.
So hopefully, I mean, we'll see what happens. This is wishful thinking on day 3. This is wishful thinking on day 3.
I don't know what was in your breakfast. Peanut butter.
Well, I'm flying.
But So yes. Short answer is yes.
yes.
There's a very good chance we'll see you here next year.
Yes.
So. Lovely. Oh, well, thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you. It's been very nice.
It's a lovely show. You deserve great success, but to be honest, you've written a show which is a success, so I don't think you'll have any trouble finding that program.
Very kind. Thank you very much.
Why don't you go make a cup of tea? I don't see any good reason why you should be helping me. I said on the phone that I work best alone. I won't hold your hand and I'm no chaperone. Been at this job for a bloody long time. Sniffed out the cause of 1,000,000 crimes. And in my history, there is no mystery. No, in my history, there is no mystery. If there's a suspect 9 times out of 10, you don't need to ask questions, it's probably them. There hasn't been a murder that I haven't solved. There's never a twist or surprises involved. I've been in this job for a bloody long time. Realisation of all of these crimes is in my history. There is no mystery. No, in my history, there is no mystery. When I was a young lad on Christmas Eve, waiting for Santa, oh how I believed in Jesus, the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, the magic of all things we cannot see. But in my history, there is no mystery. No, in my history, there is no mystery. No Santa, no Tooth Fairy, Jesus or God. There's nothing there hiding that weird or odd. I've been at this job for a bloody long time, and all I want now is an unsolvable crime. Something to leave me scratching me head, a reason to get myself out of bed. But in my history, there is no mystery. No, in my history, there is no mystery. No, in my history, there is no mystery. In murder.
And there we are, a second song from that show, There's No Mystery in Murder. And before that, of course, you heard that wonderful conversation with Alexis Rose and Will Lambert about that show. I really enjoyed it, and I do hope that they'll be presenting new things at future Edinburgh Festival Fringes. Because, as I said earlier, it's very difficult to make the structure that you need to make a successful detective story work match what you need to make a successful musical work. It can, of course, be done, and it has been done here, but it's still relatively rare. And I'm sure this is a subject that we'll return to here on Musical Talk. But, by way of a small diversion before we finish this episode, did you notice right at the beginning of the conversation I made reference to a song, fairly obscure it must be said now, called You're a Builder Upper? And that's a song by Harold Arlen, with lyrics both by Ira Gershwin and Yip Harburg. And it comes from a revue from 1934 on Broadway called Life Begins at 8:40, which ran at the Winter Garden Theatre for 237 performances over 1934 and 1935, and is perhaps most famous for its song Let's Take a Walk Around the Block, but as I say, You're a Builder Upper is also another song from that show. And it's one of those clever, tricksy lyrics that you do expect from Yip Harburg and indeed from Ira Gershwin. It starts something like, you're a builder upper, a breaker downer, a holder outer, and I'm a giver inner. And later on has the rather wonderful rhyme that's, I'm a taker on the chinner. It's an excellent song, and if you do get a chance to listen to it, I would. I think it's a great song. It's a throwaway, but it's none the worse for that. And anything by Arlen, Gershwin and Harburg is worth listening to. And just a tiny little fact about the cast of Life Begins at 8:40 from 1934. It featured Burt Lahr and Ray Bolger, who would very soon be appearing, at the end of that decade in fact, in The Wizard of Oz, with lyrics by Yip Harburg and music by Harold Arlen. And if you're particularly interested in the show, there is an album of it which you can buy in CD or stream online from the company PS Classics. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Musical Talk. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's also whetted your appetite for this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And after its triumphant return in style and size last year in 2022, I think we're all looking for a bumper edition of this particular annual event in 2023. And don't forget, Musical Talk will of course be there, covering a number of shows and telling you all about them over the course of the next few weeks and months. Well, it's nearly time for the end of the episode, but it is just time to say, have you heard of Cauldron of Disney? If you haven't, let me tell you a little bit about it. It's our old friend, fellow Musical Talk presenter David Herzog and his wife April, who have set up their own podcast to talk about all things Disney. The movies, the parks, also trivia from the world of Disney. But here's the twist. David and April are learning Welsh, so their episodes are the perfect length and pace for Welsh learners. So if you've ever wanted to learn Welsh, or you are already a Welsh speaker, or are actually in the process of learning Welsh and are interested in anything to do with Disney, and of course that does include their musical shows and films, then why not try that podcast, Cauldron of Disney? Now that's its name in English, but actually if you're looking for it online, go for Crochan Disney. My apologies for the pronunciation, but I'll spell that Crochan and Disney in the usual spelling. 3 episodes have so far been produced, and the July one relates to The Little Mermaid. Why not try it out? But for the time being, it must be time to bring this episode to an end, and there's really only one way to do it. Can we guess what that is? I'll give you a one-word clue. Goodbye. That was it. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2023, except for the songs where the copyright remains with the original creators. And my thanks go to them for allowing me to play their songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Musical Talk Thos. what I'm going to ask you to do, if that's okay, and I hope you don't mind this sort of just, straight in. I hope that doesn't seem terribly rude.
No, it's fine.
I'm going to ask you each one by one to give your name and your involvement in the piece. One of you should name the piece. A number of people forget that. So important fact. And then I will just ask you a question, and we'll get into the conversation. And then the profile of the conversation could be anything from 20 minutes to 40 minutes, something like that. So if that's all right, then we'll just roll it through and see how it goes.
Sounds good.
Perfect, thank you. Well, terribly easy to work with, I hope.
Do you want to say what the show's called then?
Oh, you wrote it. You should probably start.
Okay.
You can mention it again, by the way.
Yeah, I'll keep every 5 minutes.
Every 5 minutes, drop the title.
Yeah.
Well, forgive me, I will start with you then,
Yes.
if that's okay.
Yeah,
as the
yeah,
writer.
yeah.
So,
Hello.
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, you're ahead of me. Go for it.